Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to this workshop. My name is Sanna Herkama. I come from the Turku University, Finland.
And my name is, that's
Sorry,
quite strong.
It's me.
My name is Inari Harjuniemi. I'm also from the University of Turku.
Yes, so this workshop we have 25 minutes to get into the topic of implementation and effective implementation of bullying prevention programs in school. Lessons learned from research and practice. And we are a bunch of people. I'll quickly show who we are participating today. Inari and me, we are here. Inari is going to give a short presentation and I'm moderating the little workshop we have. And then we have some input from Western Australia. Natasha Pierce has pre-recorded a presentation beforehand, but unfortunately due to COVID, she wasn't able to come here. And also Jeremy Seckert and Susie Clarkson from the University of Wales and University of Bangor have been planning this session with us, but unfortunately they were not able to be here today with us. But what we're talking about today, this workshop explores how to improve program fidelity of school-based bullying prevention programs. Fidelity refers to implementing the program as planned. As we know, schools tend to modify programs to better meet their needs, and of course then comes the question how much can be a program modified in order to still be effective, and how to build school capacity to implement bullying prevention programs. How could we support schools in delivering programs? It's not enough if we have a program that it's proven to be effective. We also need the schools to be able to implement them, and they need to be feasible and easy to deliver. So basically we're talking what are the building blocks of successful implementation. So really this is an opportunity, a short one, to learn from research, but also we would want to learn from you. We especially with Inari are planning implementation support, so we are developing a project how we could best support teachers and schools in delivering bullying prevention program. So we are here also to learn, so all sorts of knowledge translation is more than welcome. And to begin with, we would want to know who is here from the research background. If you could just raise your hands, quite many of you. Any teachers present? Few. Please share your ideas and thoughts on implementation. So really implementation, what does it mean? It's a process of bringing the program alive at everyday life at school. So what we're talking about, what we are supposed to do in order to reduce bullying, how often we do actions, things, deliver program, how well do we do those things, for how long, by whom, why, is there a motivation among the school staff to do those things? So we tend to refer to these issues as using the Hoover. It's not enough to have a fancy Hoover in your cupboard, but you really need to bring the Hoover out and do systematic work, and that's about implementation. So really, if we want to reduce bullying, what do we do in practice? There's going to be two presentations today in the context of two different bullying prevention programs. One is Kiva anti-bullying program developed in Finland for basic education. And then another example of implementation comes from Western Australia, Friendly Schools, which is a whole school community program for students from kindergarten to grade 1 to 9. So Inari will start how to improve the implementation of Kiva anti-bullying program. She will tell about the project that we're currently planning, and then Natasha is having her talk as a pre-recorded talk, and that's about school capacity to implement such programs. But Inari, floor is yours.
Thank you. I come there so I can switch the slide by myself. As said, my name is Inari Harjuniemi. I'm a PhD student in the University of Turku. And at first I'm going to present you what Kiva is, because not necessarily all of you know it. So Kiva is a whole school program that has both universal and indicated kind of actions within it. Universal actions mean things that are delivered to whole school, every kid within the school, like curriculum that teaches the kid to recognize bullying and kind of how one should act with their peers. And indicated actions are meant for the students that participate in bullying. They are ways to have a talk with the bullying student or the one that has been bullied. And Kiva has been implemented quite widely in Finland. In 2011, around 90% of schools were delivering Kiva at their schools. And of course, we have kind of large-scale data that shows that Kiva is an effective way to reduce bullying. And what we're currently interested in, of course, it has been quite a while before the Kiva was first implemented in Finland. Now the question that we have been pondering is that how we can still support the schools after 10 years the implementation was kind of originally made. And well, of course, we're kind of wanting to know what kind of problems the schools face while they are trying to implement the program. And we know that the lack of resources, time, sometimes money is a big issue for the teachers. The knowledge regarding the program, like it's hard to implement something if you don't know what that program is or how is it done in your school. And of course, to kind of know how the program is supposed to be done in your school needs some sort of school level coordination. And of course, there can be multiple issues within the school community that affect the implementation. For example, if the teachers aren't supporting each other or the principal kind of doesn't believe in the program, it's kind of hard for the individual teacher to keep the program going on. And yeah, the reason why we are interested in this topic is because it has been shown in some studies that the better the program is implemented or the higher dosage that is delivered, it reduces the bullying more. Yeah.
Might need to go on.
Yeah, I was just wondering that it looks identical. So we are currently studying how we could support the schools. Sanna has done some great interviews in which some teachers have told that they would want support from the program developers to kind of be able to deliver it better. And we're having a RCT coming in which we are training and mentoring the schools to see if kind of training and mentoring is something that could help the schools to implement the program better and to furthermore decrease the bullying within those schools.
Yes, can you put
the
video?
Sure.
And while you're listening, we have a few minutes of a discussion later on. We would really want to hear from either research perspective or from the practical point of view. What are the barriers that schools often face, whatever it's from the literature that you think of it as a barrier to really for the high quality implementation? We could discuss of those things. And then again, the other perspective is that once we know the barriers, what should we do? Okay, if there's lack of time, what can we do about it? If there's lack of motivation, commitment, how to support schools in everyday practices. And I think anything we can come up during this workshop on those implementation issues, that identifying key problems is of course the question of making the implementation and the world better at schools when it comes to bullying, and then again what kind of support or actions should be taken on school level, administrative level, national level, individual teachers, parents, whatever, in a way to support the high quality implementation. Here comes one example from the Western Australia. I think they're one step ahead of us. So they've tried one type of support model and to come up with it. And you can hear from this example when Natasha is talking about their way of making life better when it comes to implementation. Okay, and we can't hear Natasha. Any help from this? No? We are trying to show a video, but it seems like the speaker's not.
Hi everyone, my name is Natasha Pearce from the Telethon Kids Institute in Perth, Western Australia. Welcome to the workshop. One of the challenges that we have in implementing school-based bullying prevention.
What happens there? There's nothing.
Intervention says, how do we achieve the same positive outcomes in real-world busy schools that's been shown in research studies? So there's lots of debate on whether fidelity, which is adherence to the intervention as it was tested, is needed, or if there's a balance between keeping that fidelity but making adaptations to the local school.
I was wondering, should it be saved on the...
Replicate the screen, because I think it's on extended.
Yeah, let's try that. I can also display settings.
Okay, since we have some time, any ideas on the barriers when she's working on the on the video? We have a bit of a barrier, but please go ahead.
Sorry. I know that there are other obvious barriers like time.
Sorry, too many technological devices here. Yeah, obvious time.
Okay. I know that there's obvious barriers such as time and resources, but to really truly have an impactful study, one of the biggest barriers I find working with is working with parents with alternate views of what a definition for bullying is versus mean behaviour. So when you've done a nationwide project like Kiva, is there any adapted programs for parents and to educate parents on how they can collaborate with the schools or with students regarding bullying and these types of issues?
So that was more of a question, comment?
Question and
Yeah. Well,
barrier
Kiva,
that
yeah.
you could consider? Rhetorical?
Well, Kiva has component for parents. Back to school night materials, information letters, but and some cooperative tasks, for example, within the preventive lessons that you would do. And of course, I think that's more of a context issue that different schools, for example, or different countries might have different regulations when to contact the parents and how to do it and things like this. And when it comes to indicated actions and tackling acute cases of bullying, I think cooperation with parents is important. But when it comes to the support model that we're developing, so far we have been more concentrating on teachers and the teachers' roles and their capacity and skills to recognize, to intervene, their values, their efficacy beliefs. And in a way, I think the first idea and attempt was just to think of how could we support teachers to at least deliver the components that are there, because it seems an obvious problem that we have a multi-component program, but it's extremely hard to deliver all of the components in hectic school day. So in a way, I have a feeling less is more. So I think at the first, we try to somehow see how to function within the school. Does that make sense?
But the lack of common language is a thing that Finnish teachers struggle as well. And they also have difficulties with parents that define bullying in a different way. And like of how to create it. Yeah, common understanding.
Yeah.
But I guess our video is here.
Yes, thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Natasha Pearce from the Telethon Kids Institute in Perth, Western Australia. Welcome to the workshop. School-based bullying prevention interventions is how do we achieve the same positive outcomes in real-world busy schools that's been shown in research studies. So there's lots of debate on whether fidelity, which is adherence to the intervention as it was tested, is needed, or if there's a balance between keeping that fidelity but making adaptations to the local school context without compromising effectiveness. So in my briefing presentation, I'm going to describe a really practical co-design implementation process that aimed to successfully embed friendly schools, which is a whole school Australian social emotional wellbeing and bullying prevention intervention. So I'd just like to quickly acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I am presenting, the Noongar Whadjuk people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So Friendly Schools has quite a long history of research studies that have contributed to its evidence base, where we've built and tested strategies to reduce bullying and cyberbullying in a range of different contexts, for example, primary or secondary schools or specific at-risk populations. But throughout this journey, there's been common barriers to implementing this whole school approach that's required, quite a complex approach that's required to address bullying behaviours. Things that the Kiva team have already noted, like leadership, staff and parent engagement, competing in priorities. And whilst they're common, there's also a unique factor for each school's local context as well that requires some tailoring of those implementation supports and tools as well. And one of the most common barriers presented by the schools in our research studies is a really need for a systematic planning implementation process that can help them overcome things like high staff turnover and the long-term nature of implementing such a whole school approach. So they really needed a master implementation plan. So we embarked on a longitudinal multi-site qualitative study with 8 schools over 4 years to co-design an implementation process and tools to create that master plan. As they say, a goal without a plan is just a wish. So together with the schools, we created an implementation model that you can see before you, where we had a 5-stage and 14-step implementation process to deliver that whole school approach. I'll unpack the stages as I go along, but just to note that, which are in the middle circle there, the outside white circle was really about addressing the key drivers of successful implementation that the schools noted were leadership, organisational support and staff competencies as really those key important ones. And so we've got a range of tools and strategies to try and address those, which I'll also mention as I go along. The outside blue circle was more about the outcomes. So seeing how the implementation process and addressing those drivers for implementation, we really wanted to see outcomes of, good evidence-based practice being implemented that's embedded in the school's vision and strategic planning, to promote that long-term sustainability that's required. This version is the same model, just with the tools created around the outside that were really aiming to support schools to deliver quality implementation. So the first stage was all about getting ready. At the start of the implementation process, schools form staff wellbeing teams. They may use existing teams or create new wellbeing teams, but we found that they really required a significant amount of time at this stage to really build their own team capacity and competencies, and really some time to engage staff before they even suggested any practice changes. They also wanted to identify barriers to implementation early and make sure that Friendly Schools was a good fit for their school and how to align it to their school vision and strategic plan. So if they didn't spend quite a lot of time in this getting ready stage, they found that they were having staff buy-in challenges the whole way through, and it really held up their implementation process and getting off the ground. So one of the tools we developed was called a capacity and readiness check tool for teams to assess their school against 10 factors that we know influence successful implementation. You can see the list there on the left. They received a report back which rated these 10 factors for their school as high, medium or low levels of readiness, and it really gave them a baseline from which to plan and build their capacity in areas that perhaps had come up lower or identified as barriers for their school. The second stage was about exploring their needs and their strengths. So this included a staff and survey tool to identify their current wellbeing status and those risk and protective factors that we know are really important to address bullying behaviours, and also a map gap practice assessment, which was a review of current school policies and practice against what we know is the best practice evidence. So we found that this stage was one of the most powerful strategies and tools to really engage the whole school in presenting their own school data and understanding what their needs were, and particularly for teachers in terms of tailoring the social emotional learning curriculum to their student needs. The Map the Gap practice tool allowed schools to identify what they were doing really well across a range of whole school components that you can see there on the left, and identify gaps in practice, but also perhaps areas where they were doing too much and could even stop implementing or replace with more effective strategies. So it was a great tool for them to be able to really look at their current practice and plan from there. So that leads on to stage 3, which was about planning for improvement, using the data they collected through those first 2 stages, with some additional planning and assessment tools to help them select their priorities for action. And really build staff specific capabilities around those priority actions that they had chosen, so using a strength-based approach to build on where they were at. A range of whole school resources and teacher training helped them to prepare and support staff with those proposed practice changes. For example, there's a whole lot of whole school toolkits to help them plan and implement changes to their policy and their environment. So this shows a physical environment toolkit that would help them make changes to their school environment to facilitate positive social interactions, and other toolkits for engaging families, which is really, we know is really important. Stage 4 was about putting everything into action, so implementing the plan. Schools highlighted a real need for advice from other schools at this stage through the creation of a range of school case study examples and lots of opportunities for sharing ideas on overcoming implementation barriers at this stage. So there was lots of resources around that, particularly around further toolkits to support schools to implement the developmental social emotional learning curriculum, on building student social skills and positive relationships. Things like the curriculum book for teachers and also posters to reinforce those messages in the playground. I think this is probably where we saw the most adaptation happening by staff in the classrooms, was tailoring the social emotional learning curriculum to their student needs based on the data. But we thought that the curriculum was flexible enough to account for this tailoring, and that it could even be suggested that it improved the impact on student outcomes. So all of our case study schools at the end of the 4 years showed increases in social emotional wellbeing and decreases in bullying behaviours. The last stage was about reflection and review. So with any quality improvement process, schools wanted time to review the changes that they'd made in practice, their practices and processes, and to really look at the impact on student outcomes and then plan forward for sustainability. So a range of monitoring and progress tools were developed to support this process. So I think in conclusion, I guess the biggest thing that we learned that implementation is all about changing on purpose to fit the context. And a systematic implementation process showed that adaptation to context is really necessary for quality implementation, that it requires matched implementation strategies for, to meet the unique needs of each school. But having an implementation cycle, such as the one I've shown, really created a positive learning culture, which was beneficial. And we also saw that the solution changed over time because it changed the problem. So we needed to see what emerged over time. So having that cyclic nature of moving through an implementation process was really helpful. It also highlighted that you need to allow time for effective whole school implementation. We know from our Friendly Schools research, it can take schools up to 2 to 4 years in cycles to really get to that full